Hello, this is Tony Hiller from realclimatescience.com. This video is another story of government scientists pushing their predictions out into the future after they originally failed. 3 years ago, these were the predictions from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for sea level rise at Lower Manhattan. They had an extreme scenario, a high scenario, intermediate high, intermediate low, and low. Actual sea level rise is shown in black, and it was below all of their scenarios. There's been no acceleration in sea level rise in New York. But this wouldn't do for people in government pushing global warming fears. So sometime since Joe Biden occupied the White House, they changed their predictions. Under their new scenarios, sea level rise is below all of them, but they don't start to diverge until the year 2020. Let's compare that to their previous predictions from 3 years ago, when they started to diverge around the year 2000. What they did was they pushed the start date of their bogus predictions out by 20 years to the year 2020. Now let's look at some sea level fakery from NASA. They show that sea levels started rising much faster after the year 1993. You can see that in this upwards curvature of the graph. But few, if any, tide gauges from around the world which have long-term data show this upwards curvature. Sea level at Boston, Massachusetts is rising at the same rate now as it was 100 years ago. Sea level at Atlantic City, New Jersey is rising at the same rate now as it was 110 years ago. Sea level at Philadelphia is rising at the same rate now as it was 120 years ago. Sea level in the San Francisco Bay now is about the same as it was in 1940. Sea level at Crescent City, California is falling at about the same rate now as it was 90 years ago. Sea level at Seattle, Washington is rising at about the same rate now as it was 120 years ago. Sea level at Stockholm, Sweden is falling at the same rate now as it was 130 years ago. Greta has to walk a little bit further to the beach now than she did when she appeared at the United Nations. Sea level at Sydney isn't much different than it was 135 years ago, and there's definitely been no upwards acceleration. The only thing that seems to have changed at Sydney's Bondi Beach since 1889 are the costumes which people are wearing. The attire peaked around 1989 and now is at an all-time record low. Few, if any, of the long-term tide gauges show any acceleration. But somehow when NASA averages all of the data together, they come up with an upwards curvature which doesn't seem to exist at any individual tide gauges. This is the fairly typical fraudulent mathematics of the climate scam. Toto's been pulling back the curtain on this big money racketeering operation for the past 15 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, Caesar, Toki, Upala, and the 4 new puppies on the web at realclimatescience.com.